The MAC acknowledges that we operate on the occupied lands of the people that the European settlers called Pomo, Wapo, Lake Miwok, and Winton. These are the original people of this place who have been here since time immemorial. Their descendants live here today. They are the past, present, and future stewards of this land. We recognize the great harm done in this place to the original people, as well as their resilience. We pledge to continue to build authentic relationships and work together with them through creative action toward healing both the land and the people. We also recognize that our work is but a small step towards reconciliation and that there is much work to be done. We're very honored to have 4 esteemed storytellers with us this evening: Anthony Steele, Corrine Pierce, Kyle Bill, and Eric Wilder. And we'll begin with Anthony Steele.
Oh, Mayukat Kemsel Hekate, Weekend Keil, Anthony Steele, Linton Buck, Koi Buck, I Kete Koi Sat, Bodai Sat, Katui Kashaya Timat, Yokea Nemya. Good afternoon, you all. It's good to be here. My name is Keil, and also Anthony Steele is what they have on my driver's license. I come to you from a people called Linton out of Sonoma County, and we're from Kashaya over on Bodega, over that way. A little village called Matini is where our people come from, and on my grandfather's also from Round Valley, so Wailaki. And my grandmother's from over in Lower Lake, which is called Khoi people over that way. So I say Khoibuk. And Bodai is the little village where she was born. And I said, that's where I live as well. I live in Bodai, which is right there. My wife and I live in Lower Lake. I shared with you in my language also that from Lake County that I grew up in parts of my life in Sonoma County, mostly all in Sonoma County, and then also in in Kashaya, which is a little place up on the hill by Walala, Stewart's Point, if you don't know that area. I was born in Ukiah and lived in this area lots of my life. I did move around quite a bit though. But growing up, I heard a lot of stories from grandmas and aunties and uncles. And some of them were old and about, about the earth and about the water and about the animals, and some weren't, some were funny and just about different things. And the one thing that I've learned growing up is that I was under the impression, growing up, and I had more of a closed mind when I was younger. And as I grew older, a lot of elders have taught me that everybody is a storyteller. Everybody has a story. And we all have a story. Our story begins from when we were born. And when I accepted to come and share some stories, I had some old stories that I wanted to share, and different beautiful stories about the birds and the quails and the water and the different stories that I know, and coyote. And when I knew that I found out later that this group is going to be diverse, and I prayed on it. Yesterday and today I woke up, and I woke up early this morning, and I was praying to the sun coming up over the mountain. And I asked in my language, Creator, give me the good words, and give me the story that that should be told, you know, one of the old stories. And it came into my heart, a story. And it's not an old story. It's an old story, but it's not ancient old, you know. But it's important. You know, I realized that listening to a story is important to come in and listen with an open heart, you know, and an open mind. And that's what stories do, is it teaches us about our ways. It teaches us about the land. It teaches us about how to treat people and how to love people and how to love one another. And so our stories really talk about the land and, you know, the animals and how creation began. And it gives us a spiritual connection to our homes, you know, where we're from. You know, in my language, we say "bak," and that means that the land here owns me. This is where my ancestors walked. And so my mother, who is European, can't say that. You know, she can't say this is where my ancestors walked for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. You know, I love my mother and I honor her. And I love that she says that she's European American. And we don't really know what American is, but European Americans, that her ancestors came over on a boat. So I just love that honesty that she gives me, you know. And so my story is going to be about an old man. And long time ago, you know, when things started to change for our people, my grandfather told me these things, these times that were going to happen. My grandmother and my aunties talked about how from the stars, you can look down on the earth and it was all beautiful at night because it was dark. There were these little tiny pieces of light every so often. And she said that when the coyote was looking down on our earth, that there was going to be a day where it looked like a roadmap, like there was going to be like a spider web. It was just going to be lights everywhere. And they told this story before electricity. And so now that if you're flying over the towns and if you're in space, and we get those pictures from people in space and you look down on the earth, it looks like a spider web. And those are old stories from Navajo Nation. Those are foretold long time ago that this earth was going to change like that. And so this old man, he practiced the old ways, and he was a medicine man in his own way, but he never told anybody he was. And he never advertised that or anything. It was something very, very private, very special. And those special gifts aren't shared to everybody. But he was invited, you know, spending his whole life in the Mendocino coast, enjoying, you know, seedweed gathering and acorns and the roundhouse ceremonies and all the beautiful things all his life. He could speak a little bit of English, you know, he was pretty versed in English at the time, but he tried to help his people by keeping everything still traditional, you know, as best he could. And so he met a lot of people, you know, anthropologists, and he met linguists and people that wanted to record his language. And, you know, he even met some congressmen over that would come over in horse and buggy and visit him. And they would want to know more about him, you know, and where he came from, and what he wanted to do for his people. And so they invited him. They invited him to travel all the way out to this place called New York. And he barely went to San Francisco. He didn't know anything about New York or anything like that, cities. And so he would travel. He did travel out there in company with this friend who was a congressman, and his the congressman was, back in those days, there were no leaders of the government that were of color, and so obviously he was Caucasian. He was European American, and he invited him out there, and they went downtown, and if you've ever been in that big city, New York, I went one time in my life, and it is so much hustle and bustle. It was totally different than anything he's ever experienced. He was so confused. There were people driving up and down, honking their little buggies, and there were, all these people just walking everywhere fast, and they were going so fast, and it didn't look like they were going anywhere, he thought. So he was in the middle of that hustle and bustle, and they're walking, and his friend was showing him different things. This is this building, and this is this one, and this is this theater, and he didn't really understand it or really pay so much attention to that. But walking down the street with all these people all over, he stuck his ear out. He stuck his head out, and he could hear something that was familiar in all of this. And he didn't know what it was at first. But as they walked around and he began to, breathe and hear it again, he says, "Hey, did you hear that?" he asked his friend. And his friend said, "Hear what?" And he kind of laughed at him. He said, what do you hear? And he says, "I hear something. Can you hear that? It's a cricket." He went, "A cricket?" "Yeah." He says, "I can hear that. Can you hear it?" And the congressman said, his friend said, "No, I don't hear anything like that." And so they kept walking down the street a little bit. And then the old man, he crossed the street, and a buggy almost knocked him off the road. And he got on the other side where the sidewalk is. And he stood there and he listened again. He said, "There it is again. Did you hear it?" And the congressman said, "No, I didn't hear it." And he thought his friend was losing it, the old man. Maybe he didn't understand what he was hearing. And he walked across the street, and then he went over by this building, and there was a tree there, and a kind of like a flower bed. And he looked, and his friend's across the street, and he looked and he picked it up. He says, "Here it is right here. I knew it was a cricket." And he looked at it, and his cricket, like that, and he put it down, and he felt better, because he found what he could hear, what was familiar with him. And he walked back, and his friend stand at the corner with his hands on his hips going, "How in the world did you hear that?" From way down the street with all of this hustle and bustle. And the old man just kind of looked at him, and he kind of chuckled a little bit. He says, "Well," he says, "where I come from, there's a lot of crickets, and there's a lot of the animals and the birds. And where I come from, we hear that. And where you come from in your life and your world, it's harder for you to hear those things." And he said, "Wow," he says, I want you to teach me more of that. I want you to teach me more of that." And he says, "Well, you listen from your heart, from your spirit." You listen from your, from your inside. You slow down and you listen. You listen to the animals. You listen to the birds. You listen to the water. You listen to the wind, the ocean, and you'll be able to hear these things. And he says, when I'm out here in this place, you're not used to hearing those things. And so he had a little bit of change in his pocket, and he pulled that out. He pulled that change out like that. He says, this is what people are used to hearing. And he took that change and he dropped it on the ground, and it went, and when he dropped all that change on the ground, everybody in those buggies, everybody walking, stopped and looked down on the ground for that money. And he realized, his friend realized what he was talking about, that when you come from two worlds, you have to be careful what you're listening for. So you have to be aware, you have to be open to what you're listening for. So I tell that story, and it's just a coincidence that I'm the first one, here telling stories. And so I tell that story because it's important to clean yourself when you're going to hear a story, to open your mind and to hear. Some stories that we tell, I know sound different. There's different things where the rock talks or the water says things. And if you don't know that language, like the language I first started speaking, then you're not going to understand the story. So let your spirit hear the story. And, that's one of the little stories that I wanted to start out with. And I hope you like that. And I hope you take something from it, and listen to the other storytellers, because there's great storytellers out there. Those ones with the old stories. And I'm glad I'm going first because they're awesome. But I wanted to talk about a little bit too about these. I'm sitting here playing with our beads. This is our money, in Lake County, and our Northern California money. We used to, we still make these today. And this is huya we call this. And it's made out of clamshells. And we make beautiful necklaces and regalia out of it. But the one thing that our family, when I said my name is Ke'il, and that was given to me by my grandmother. And my grandmother spoke her language. And she lived on Kashaya for a lot of years. Even she was from Lake County and spoke a different language. She still understood, she began to understand Kashaya language. And she used to tell us stories about the crows. Even today when I see a crow, I said, there's my grandma, the crows. And she used to tell a story about the crows and how smart the crows are. We're a family of birds, in Lake County. There's a lot of old stories about birds, and that we come from birds. And so all of my brothers and sisters are birds. Hummingbird, my little brother, is Tulen, and that's in our Kashaya language, Tule, means hummingbird. And then there's pui pui, my sister pui pui. And that's the mockingbird over in our Southeastern language over here, the one I was speaking. And then ki'il. Ki'il is the meadowlark. And there's a lot of stories about these birds. And there's a lot of other birds too. And so Grandma used to name us the birds. And so the crow is another very a lot of people don't understand the crows, you know, and how smart they are, you know, and a lot of people do. That's a good thing that a lot of people study them and watch them but a lot of people don't understand how beautiful and smart the birds are and how they talk to us. And they tell us things. They tell us when the wind's going to come really hard. And they tell us when the rain is going to let up. The birds tell us, we have a bird called bokotet khanu, which is the flicker bird. And the flicker bird tells us, you know, when the wind is going to be strong the next day. And then when the rain or the wind's going to stop. And so, and then there's another bird. And that bird is the bokot bokot, and they all have pretty songs and pretty stories. So this man in this village, he was a hunter, and one day he went out and he began to you know, walk and walk. He was a hunter because he liked to go out, but he didn't like to go out with the other group. He liked to go out by himself, you know, and spend time with the birds. And so as he ran out there and he was walking around, he knew where all the birds, they kind of nested, you know, and they stayed. So he was really interested in getting to know the crows. And he was walking down this path near the water, and it started to go up on this hill. And as he got on top of the hill, he looked, and those crows weren't in the trees. They were all on the ground. And in our language, we say ow, ow for crow. And so ow, ows were all on the ground, and they were all in their circle. And they were all kind of hopping like that. And they were hopping around and around and around. And then he kind of kneeled down, you know, and he looked over this bush and he just watched them. And he looked and he seen that crow. There was one in the middle, and it was dead. He was dead. Kalalit. He kalalit. They kept saying kalalit, kalalit. That means he's dead. He's dead. So then he just kind of backed away, and they looked at him. They realized that they were being watched by this man. And they started flying up, and they picked up their dead crow, and they flew with him, and they flew around, and they flew all around him. They began to go around and around and around. And then they looked down, and one came down to him and stopped, and he just kind of sat down there on the ground. And then he said, what do you want, boy? What do you want? He looked and he talked to him in his own language, you know. He told him, he talked to him in his own language. And he says, Hadafadikis. I don't know. I just was looking. I'm interested in being your friend. And then that crow said, well, then come with us. Come to our place. And he walked with them, and they were flying around, and they went up, and they all greeted him, you know, hey, come on and welcome. And they showed him the place where they slept, and where they swam, and they cleaned up, and where they buried their young, where they buried their dead. And so the next day he came back, and the next day he came back, and they invited him into their family. And then one day they started joking at him. they started laughing at him and saying something to him, and then he got offended. He got hurt. His feelings got hurt, you know. So he went home and he says, "I wonder if they want me to come back." And then they came down to the village where he was at in the morning, because he didn't show up in the early morning. He was just sitting at the village, and those crows, they started doing this noise. Like that. And he looked and he knew that noise. That was the time to go. That was the time to go and be with them. That was their call for you to go outside and be with them and walk with them. So he recognized that sound. And so he went with them. He went up to the village, and he said, they said, "Why didn't you come out in the morning?" He says, "Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to come out. And I thought you guys were just making fun of me, and you didn't want me around you guys. You didn't accept me as yours." And he says, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's how we have fun. We're just joking. It's just our way of having fun. We don't mean no harm by that." So then he says, "Oh, okay." So they were playing around. He came back and he came back again. And then there was two of them that were they were kind of chasing each other and fighting each other and kind of flying around. And then one dropped this rock right on his head, the warrior's head, the boy's head. And then the boy looked up like that and said, "Ow, why'd you do that?" And he says, "Oh, I was just having fun." He goes, "Well, that's no way to have fun. That hurt." And he got his feelings hurt. So he went home and he didn't go back. So there was weeks and weeks and weeks went by. And then they came down and they flew down to the village, and he missed him. He missed them a lot, you know. He had a lot of good times with them, and they missed him. So they went down and they said, "Hey, why they're sitting up in the trees," and they called them like that. And he said he didn't go at first, and they came down. Came closer to his little hut, and then he came out and he ran into the bushes. And he says, "I thought you guys didn't want me. You're throwing rocks at me. You're teasing me more and more." And he says, "Hey," those crows told them, "Don't worry about that. That's just us." "Well, I didn't know. I didn't know you didn't want me, or I didn't know what." And they said, "Well, don't expect to understand everything we do and say, because you're not a crow. You're not crow, but we love you and accept you the way you are." So he packed up all his things and he cleaned his hut up, and then he went with them and he stayed with them because that's where he felt love. So that's my story. And I just want to say, no matter what, open your heart, listen to the stories and receive it. Everybody's going to learn and receive it different. And that's what they're for. Oh. So the next speaker that is the storyteller is one of my favorite people, Corinne, and I just love the things she's doing in the community and her stories. And so, Corinne.
Thank you. Kiridiwi, ke ana pikabitamde ke she Corinne Pierce, kesil ke ana. So my name is Corinne Pierce. My Pomo name is Pikabitamde, which means basket, blossom, kind of bossy older sister. Even though I'm not the oldest sister, my oldest sister is actually listening tonight. She's much bossier than me. So I'm a basket weaver. I'm a traditional artist. I'm a storyteller. I'm a dancer. I'm a singer. I have ancestry from Mendocino and Lake County. And I have been weaving baskets since I was 9. So I'm 45 years old now, so it's been a long time. And I have a ton of stories. I actually wrote a list of stories that I grew up with. And it was a very long list. And so I didn't know which ones to tell. But what I think I really want to share a little bit is how stories can work in our culture. So stories, oral tradition is still very much active. It's how we learn. It's how we carry on tradition. And I want to talk about a little bit about that. So most of us, when we grow up in the American school system, we learn about Greek myths. So we actually know a lot more about the way that their myths are set up. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Pomo myths and the area that we consider Pomo. So there are different timelines that stories can happen in. There was a time before people, even before animals. There was a time of giants. And there are lots of stories about what the giants did and how they died and how they became the mountains that surround the lake. So those are really amazing stories, and almost all the tribes around have those stories. So that's very ancient stories. And then there's anamorphic times, which are when the animals that we know now were much more humanistic. So, they lived in villages, they lived in huts, they hunted, they did a lot of things that people do now. And then there's a lot of stories that happen between those animals. One of my very favorite stories that I grew up with that I actually tell all the time. I tell it so often because I teach. I go to different schools and I teach different grades. And one of the things that I teach about is traditional games, traditional songs. And one of the traditional stories that I grew up with was the eel and the suckerfish. And that's one of my very favorite stories. And I might tell that one. I put a star next to it. So we'll see if I am actually going to tell that one. So then there's also the stories of supernatural things, supernatural entities, frog woman, bear woman, coyote. All of these people are doing their own things. And I often compare it to like Greek gods, what you know about, they have their own stories, and then they also interact with people, they interact with animals. And then there is also special stories that are actually usually my favorite, are the stories when people are being created. Like another one of my very favorite stories is why our hands are like lizards or water dogs. And in that same story, it tells us why canines or wolves or foxes have paws the way that they do. So that's another story that I might tell, but that's when I'm sorry, I'm just a little emotional, that my mom would tell me when I was little. And I loved that one. And then along with those are the heritage stories that get passed down and are still being created. So a lot of times when we do panels like this and I hear other people talk, a lot of times the stories that they tell are about their grandmother or grandfather or great uncle, or, it happened not that long ago, but it still teaches a story and it gives us a lesson, or it teaches us how we interact socially, what is normal, what is acceptable behavior for our people. I know a lot of stories about restrictions. Like I know a lot of stories about we do this and then you don't eat that at this time of year, or, you're not allowed to do this when this is happening. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, because we had a little bit of a hard time getting this storytelling panel together because we really wanted it to be in the winter time. And that is a story in itself, because some stories are okay to tell all the time. They're just stories that are kind of like free for all, you know, community stories. And then there are stories that are more specific, more culturally specific, more spiritually charged, I guess might be the right word. And those stories have to be told during the winter because in our belief, a lot of times certain spirits, plant spirits, animal spirits are sleeping at that time. And you don't want to tell the stories when these entities are awake. That's where the scary stories come in. And I'll leave those up to Eric because I don't like scary stories and I don't tell them. And I promised my sister I wouldn't tell any scary stories today. But those ones are also really important. So I'm actually gonna start with the one that Rose asked for, which was the Acorn Maiden story. And this is one that I grew up with. And I think a lot of people in Northern California grew up with it because we are acorn-focused people. And depending on where I am in our region, it can change a little bit because people have different preferences for acorns. I'm actually gonna share my screen and just show you some acorns after I tell you this story. So this story happens in the time after humans have been created, but not everything is set up for them yet on Earth. So the humans are there. Acorn maidens are still maidens at this point. They haven't transformed into anything else. And they are all very good basket weavers. So Creator comes to them, to the acorn maidens, and says, you are going down to Earth. In all of the Pomo myths that I know, Creator, no matter what name you call him, Marumda or grandfather, he lives up north. So oftentimes when you hear stories, they talk about coming down to us. He lives up north in a roundhouse. So he came to the acorn maidens and he said, you are going down to Earth to help the humans. And you will need a new hat. So basket hats are very, very common in Northern California. Pomo people didn't actually wear basket caps because of a weaving technique that we used on thump lines, but that's another thing. So these acorn maidens are going to make their caps, and they all have different strengths, and they all have different weaknesses, and they all have different levels of basketry experience. You can tell that I tell the story from a basket weaver's perspective. So Valley Oak, who is an excellent weaver and has excellently prepared materials, starts right away. She's been doing it a long time. She's really, really, really good at it. And she's also kind of a jerk. So she's weaving, and Blue Oak, who doesn't have the best material, but is working with what she has, is weaving. And Valley Oak's like teasing her, like, oh, you guys are so slow. Oh, your material is not very good. Black Oak is kind of lazy, and she decided that she was going to take a nap and not work on her basket. She would get to it a little bit later. And Tan Oak is weaving. She's a new weaver, so she's a little bit slow, and she's doing a really good job. So she's weaving. Everybody's doing their stuff. Everybody's done. Valley Oak is so good that she's done already. So she has time to tease everybody else about how slow they are, about how their materials aren't as nice as hers, how it doesn't fit right. So she was no good. That's how the story goes that I know. So Creator came down a little bit earlier than expected and says, okay, are you ready? And of course, Valley Oak is ready. And Blue Oak is ready. Looks a little rough, but she's ready. Black Oak just woke up. So she doesn't even have a hat made. So what she does is she grabs the closest cooking basket and puts it on her head. And poor Tanoke, her basket is done, but when you make a twine basket, you leave ends sticking out, and she didn't have time to trim the ends. So she had to go the way it was. So she put it on with all the sticks sticking out. Black Oak puts on her cooking cap. Valley Oak puts on her perfect cap. Tan Oak puts on her bumpy cap. And all the acorns have their own explanation. I love stories that also combine plant identification. I think that that's really important. So anyway, Creator gathers them up and tosses them to earth. And this part always gets me emotional, so don't laugh. But when they're on their way down, they realize that they're going to be food, and that's scary. So they are so scared that they turn their faces up into their little cap, which is so cute. So next time you get an acorn, take off its little cap and you'll see her little face. And one of the cool things about this story is my tribe in Ukiah Valley, we really prefer black oak acorns. And you can tell by looking around our valley how many black oak acorns there are. The black oak acorn who put the cooking cap on her hat, when she hits the ground, because her hat wasn't actually made to fit her head, it pops off. So black oak acorns very rarely have their cap still attached. And I'm going to share my screen. And this is actually a slideshow that I did for something else. But I want you guys to see what the acorns look like. Oh, done, never mind, sorry. Let me do a slideshow. Okay, so just wanting you guys to see these oaks. So that valley oak is that long, skinny oak, and it has a sharp V on the bottom, helps you remember valley oak. So this is just blurry. This is what that black oak looks like. So she has the cooking cap for the cooking basket for a cap. And I want you to see the striations on these acorns, because one of the really cool things about this story is not only does it inspire basket caps, the tattoos, the facial tattoos that the women wear on their chin are also inspired by these acorn maidens. Here's the tan oak, who didn't have time to trim the sticks off of her cap. Here's the blue oak, who made a very nice cap. It just didn't have the best material to work with. And this is a valley oak. So you can actually see the striations very well. So her cap is beautiful and well made. And so there's a little bit more to that story. So on the way down, and this story comes from a little bit more north than my territory, where they prefer tan oak. So that's my disclaimer for this next portion of the story. On the way down, tan oak wishes, or says out loud, or however she says it, Creator, please make me the best tasting, because I have the ugliest hat. And I think that's so cute. So they think that she has the best tasting acorn mush, and it is good. It's my second favorite. So that's the story of the acorn maidens. But another thing is Valley Oak was so salty and bitter to her fellow weavers that's how she tastes. And we don't use Valley Oak for acorn mush unless we're starving. So that's one of my favorite stories that my mommy used to tell me when I was little. And then I think I wanted to tell another one, and I have enough time, I think. All right, so I'm going to ask you guys, and you guys can say in the chat if you want to hear the eel and the suckerfish or the first song. So whoever answers first is going to get what they want. I might do the first song. Okay, that's what I was thinking about. Okay, so this is an ancient story. This is a story before people, or at the time of people were just being made. Coyote was on the shores of Clear Lake. And Coyote, for my people, for Pomo people, isn't usually referred to as creator. He is one of the creators, and he's definitely creator's brother, right-hand man, but he isn't creator. So I just want to let you know that before the story starts. He's camping on the shore of Clear Lake, and he caught his tail on fire by accident. And instead of running into the lake, he ran in the opposite direction, and he caught everything on fire. And I always get emotional when I tell the story, because everywhere in California, you have experienced fire. You know what that's like. So everything caught on fire, and it burned and burned so hot that there was nothing left on the planet. The fire burnt so hot that the dirt, that the earth of Mount Canocti turned red. So that's one of the reasons that the earth is red, just one of them. And there's nothing left but ashes and smoke. And Creator, who's still at his house up north, sees the smoke, sees the ashes, sees the flames and the glow from the fire. And after the fire is pretty much over, he comes down, and there's nothing left. There's no animals. There's no plants. There's nothing. And Creator has a special little rabbit skin pouch. And he takes out of this pouch an elderberry flute. And you guys are probably familiar with elderberry, the tree. It's medicinal, it's berries, it's flowers. It also makes musical instruments. So not only does it make flutes, but it also makes clappers. And something that I find really interesting and relates to the story is that elderberry grows almost everywhere in the world. There's very few places that it doesn't grow. And everywhere that it grows uses it for musical instruments. And a lot of the folklore about that plant is similar. But anyway, Creator pulls that flute out, and he plays the first song. So no music had existed before. And the song is so magical that it calls everything back. So I always imagine, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Fantasia 2000, but there's a volcano scene in that. And then there's a spring where, rain drops and flowers grow. And that's what I imagine happening with this magical first song. It's actually called The Dawn of Song, or Man's First Song. It's a really famous story. A lot of people have told it, so you'll hear a lot of tellings of it. And for me, it's about the elder, that it is a magical plant. And the fact that the elder music called everything back into creation, all the trees, all the plants, all the animals, even the animals in the water, actually means that elderberry can speak every language on the planet. So Anthony was talking about, if you can't speak the language, you just have to listen with your heart, or, sing with intention. So in Pomo belief, a lot of times the songs that we sing For example, a bear song or a hummingbird song or frog song. Those are actually in that animal's language. So we may have lost the ability to speak those languages, but elderberry never does. So whatever our intention is, elderberry can translate, which is so cool, which I think is just like the coolest thing ever. I really love that story. It always makes me cry. I can make it go on forever, or I can shrink it to like 2 paragraphs. That is one of my favorite stories about elder. And I don't have an elder flute with me. My elder instruments are actually on display at a gallery right now, but I know Kyle had a clapper, and I was going to ask him to unmute himself so that you guys can hear. I know most of you might know what it sounds like. Kyle, could you do that? But I want you guys to be able to hear it. Okay, so that's the sound of the clapper. And it really is our heartbeat. It is our drum beat for California, because we didn't really have a lot of skin drums. So our instrument, our drum beat instrument, was a clapper, and that's made out of elder. And that's an important plant. So I just have a few more minutes. So I actually might tell the eel and the suckerfish story, because I have it down to a fine art. Okay, eel and suckerfish were playing hand game. And so this story has a moral. Not all stories do, but this one does. So if you know eel, you know he's very long. It's a long fish. And if you know suckerfish, you know he's very short. They were playing hand game. And I'll make this very short. Eel was not having a good run of luck. And he gambled with suckerfish and he lost. So first time he lost all his money, all his baskets. He lost again. He lost his house. He lost his dogs. He lost again. He lost his wife. He lost his children. He bet it all. And he had nothing left. But he wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. And he says to suckerfish, "Suckerfish, let's play one more time. You got to give me a chance to win back some. I mean, come on, at least let me win some food, or, my wife back or something." And the suckerfish says, "You don't have anything to bet. What are you going to give me if you lose?" And so eel is thinking about it. He's like, "You know what? I know I'm going to win. I am going to win. And if I lose this game, I will give you my bones, the bones from my body." And so suckerfish is like, "Okay, let's do this." So they're playing, and the song that eel sings, they actually still sing up north. And I don't sing it because I don't think it's lucky, because he lost. Eel lost the game. So he had to give his bones to suckerfish. And if you are a fishing man or fishing person, and you ever cut those fish open, you will notice that eels have very few bones in their body, whereas a suckerfish has twice as many bones as a regular fish. That's how it happened. Also, eel should be ashamed because he gambled away his family, which is why he also lives in a rock by himself instead of a school of fish like everybody else. So that is that story. And I always love that story. I wish I could tell you all the stories my mom told me about, why a quail's top knot faces this way. There are why the dove cries. My mom told me pattern recognition stories, which I loved. She knew I was going to be a basket weaver from a really young age, because she would always tell me pattern recognition stories like, "Look at this. What do you see on the trail? it was really fun. So there are also bear doctor stories, stories about salmon, stories about why owl has spots, why the crow is black, why the owl has a short beak. And then there's a ton of scary stories, which I won't get into, but thank you very much for listening to my stories. Sorry, I'm so emotional. I'm having kind of a crazy week this year. So thank you so much. And I think that Kyle is going next. Kyle is who I just love. I even just like to stand next to him. So I'm really excited to hear your stories, Kyle. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Corinne. I'm so honored to be here around people that I look up to and admire. And I was like, I appreciate Tony sharing how we have that colonized mindset sometimes, growing up thinking that, I'm not a storyteller, but this journey has showed me that we are all storytellers and we all have a story to share with people. And so I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share with you all a story. I'm kind of recognizing that I'm an adult now and I'm not like a young person anymore. So this is kind of new for me to step into this this world of telling stories that I've learned, and I'm so grateful for those that have taken time to share with me stories. There's a deeper meaning to what we're doing when we do this. And so, but before I get into that, I want to introduce myself in my language. So, Mahakate Wihin Kyle Bill, Yahaki Lembak, Yahaki Kletzadihibak. Good evening, relatives. My name is Kyle Bill. I'm a descendant of the Quetzal Dihi Wintu Nation. I am Kletwin on my father's side. And on my mother's side, I am Nomlaki, Wintun, and Wailaki. And I grew up on her reservation in Grindstone Rancheria, which traditionally is known as Pumtidity. And so I'm grateful to be here with you all and to share these stories because they are important. As tribal people, and as an organization that I represent, which is Konokotai Native Wellness, we started a nonprofit in 2016, and I'm very humbled and honored to serve as the executive director. And we do a lot of work within tribal communities and also educating the non-Native community around our tribal culture and how we utilize it as a means of prevention when it comes to serving our tribal communities. We have been, as tribal people in many different places, experience a lot of trauma and grief and genocide within our communities. And so these stories were taken from us at a time where our elders were dying from disease, or they were taken and sent to boarding schools. And so there was a gap in the generations of when these stories were passed down from our elders to the next generation. And so this space allows us to also share with one another these stories of as Corinne had touched on, who we are, where we come from, and the values and principles that our people live by. And so that's why stories are so important. They teach us those important values, and they teach us who we are and how we are supposed to conduct ourselves. And there was a story for every stage in life that guided us throughout our journey here on Mother Earth. And so that's why these stories are important. They are, by telling stories is an act to reverse genocide. And so this has a much deeper meaning when we have a space like this to share our stories, because we know from the past that the goal was to kill the Indian and save the man. And so everything that made us who we were was meant to be stripped away so that there was only a shell left. But our people persevered, and we continue to persevere because of the resiliency and the strength that we carry within us. And this is a way of healing by telling our stories, by sharing them with our people, by sharing them with non-Native people so that they don't appropriate them, but they understand the history that our people have with this earth, the history that we have with this land, and the responsibility that we have to this land, and to aid in the reversing of colonialism by working together collectively. And so this is a beautiful time, and I appreciate all of the staff that took time to make this happen, and the staff at the Middletown and volunteers at the Middletown Art Center for allowing this collaboration to be here. And so I'm going to share a story that was shared with me it actually comes from Maidu territory. And I share this story, and so I'm so excited to share this with you all here tonight. And it's the story of the turtle. And we don't, you know, the fun thing about stories is they didn't always like have titles. So we got to come up with them. Each storyteller got to come up with their own title for the story. And so this isn't the official title, but this is what I call it, the story of Turtle. And so I'm grateful to share it with you all today. And like many of our stories, they all start with a long, 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 long time ago. Before there was land on this earth, that Creator had made this place, this earth that was only made of water. And so there was no land, there were no creatures that we know today that lived on the land. Human beings hadn't existed. And so in this time, there was only the creatures that lived in the water. And so there was all of these beautiful creatures that lived in this time. You know, the creatures that we know of today, even, you know, there was the big and strong and the courageous shark, and there was the big, the strong whale, and there were the cunning and fast fish, and there was just an array of animals in the water. And they lived in harmony, and you know, Creator made this beautiful, all these beautiful creatures that lived in the water. And you know, Creator, being as powerful as he is, and he's always wanting to change, bring about change and goodness. And so he had a plan that he wanted to do something new with this world. And so with that, he wanted a helper to help him. And so Creator is you know, thinking about all of the different creatures in this water that he could call upon. And so one day, Creator was going to do this, and he asked, he called upon the turtle, this little turtle, and he called the turtle over. And so this little turtle, he swims over to Creator, and he said, Creator, you called for me. Did you what did you need me for? And so Creator said, oh, little turtle, I have a plan. I'm going to do something. There's going to be a big change. And the turtle was very interested and curious, this little turtle. He said, well, what are you going to do? And Creator said, well, before I can tell you what I'm going to do, I need you to help me. And the turtle said, well, okay, well, what do you need me to do? And Creator said, well, what I need you to do is I need you to go swim down deep into the depths of the water. And at the very bottom of the earth, I need you to bring me a handful of dirt. And the little turtle looked at him and said, oh, well, I've never been down that far. Are you sure you want me to do this? Like, that sounds a little scary. And Creator said, well, yeah, I want you to do this. And Turtle said, well, why don't you pick the shark? He's way more courageous than me. Creator said, no, I think you're the right one. And Turtle said, well, why don't you pick the whale? He's much stronger than I am. Creator said, no, I want you to do this. I have faith that you can do this. And so the little turtle said, well, if you have faith in me, so I guess I better do this. And so Turtle said, okay, okay, Creator, I'll go ahead and do this. And so the little turtle feels empowered to do this because Creator has faith in him. And so the little turtle swims off and he's coming up with this plan. Okay, I'm going to do this. I've never been there, but we'll give it a shot. And so the little turtle in his excitement, he's just ready to do this because Creator has faith in him. And so the little turtle, he takes this deep, deep breath as big as his little lungs can hold, and he starts his journey down into the depths of the ocean, and he swims off into the depths. But one second, I need to stop this really quick. Technical issues. And so the little turtle, he goes, dives down, he takes his deep breath into the water, and he begins his journey, and he's slowly going down into the water. And at first it's fine. He's got it. He feels like he has this. There's nothing to worry about. Things are going good. So he's excited. He's like, I got this. I'm going to do this. And so he continues down his into the depths of the ocean. And as he goes down, what he notices is that it starts to get darker. So he's still okay. He's still kind of doing his thing. He feels confident in what he's doing. But then it starts to get really, really dark. And so now Turtle is starting to get a little bit more worried. He's thinking, I don't know, I'm getting a little, this is getting a little scary now. This is getting really dark. But then he keeps telling himself, but Creator had faith. He told me to do this, so I got to keep going. And so he keeps going. But as he continues to go down, he finds himself in pitch black darkness. And so now the little turtle is all by himself. It's quiet and it's dark. And the turtle begins to think to himself that I can't do this. It's too dark. I'm all alone. I'm not as strong as Creator thinks I am. I'm not as courageous as Creator thinks I am. I should just turn around and go back. And maybe I can tell him that I'll try it again, or maybe I'll tell him I got lost, or I'll tell him something. But then the little turtle remembers what Creator told him. That Creator told him that he has faith in his ability to do this task. And so the little turtle begins to sing a song, and he begins to pray. And he asks Creator to give him the strength and courage to do what he needs to do. And so while he sings his song and he says his prayer, that little voice that was telling him to turn around, that voice that was telling him he couldn't do it, the voice that was telling him to give up, slowly started to fade away, and his song became louder, and his prayer started to become stronger, and he continued to go forward. He continued to swim down. He began to get closer, and he felt that he was getting near the end of this journey. And finally, the little turtle hits the bottom of the earth. And the little turtle finally just realized he made it, so he grabbed a big old handful of earth, as much as he could in his hands, and he just swam to the top as fast as he could. And he began to swim and to go as fast as he could to the surface. But as he began to go and swim fast and faster, all of the earth that he gathered started to just melt away through his hands. And he started to panic because all of this work that he put into, all of this earth that he grabbed was slowly just falling through his hands. But he kept going as fast as he could, hoping he would have something left. And he began to see the surface. The light started to shine. He knew he was going to reach the top of the water. And when he got to the top, he could finally see in his hands what he had left. And he didn't have anything left in his hands. It had all washed through. It was all gone. And so the turtle was so disappointed in himself, he had failed. He had put in all of this effort. He prayed, he sang, he thought, was my song not good enough? Were my prayers and my songs not strong enough? Why did I fail? Started to question himself. He started to talk down upon himself. And then he started to think about, maybe I could just tell him that he needed to find someone else to do this task. Maybe I could come up with a lie. Maybe I could fool him. But the little turtle said, no, that's not the answer. And so the little turtle slowly swims to the Creator and calls upon him. He's sad and he's disappointed in himself. So he goes to Creator and he says, Creator, Creator. And Creator comes and he says, little turtle, you made it back. Your journey took many days, but you made it back. Show me what you brought to me. Did you make the bottom? And the little turtle was sad. And Creator said, turtle, why are you sad? Did you make it to the bottom? And the little turtle slowly lifts his head up and he looks Creator in the eye and says, I did what you asked me to do. I swam to the bottom and I made it, and I grabbed a handful of dirt and I swam up, but all of it just washed away. I have nothing. Creator, I failed you. I let you down. I'm sorry. Maybe you can ask shark or whale to help you do this task. I'm not the right person. And Creator, in all his love and wisdom, embraced the turtle and gave him a hug. And he said, turtle, give me your hand. And so the little turtle slowly gave Creator his hand. And Creator took the turtle's little hand, and underneath his nails, he pulled a little bit of dirt that was underneath the turtle's nails. And he said, turtle, I didn't ask you, I didn't tell you how much earth I needed. I just asked you to try because I had faith in your ability. And from that little bit of dirt that was underneath the turtle's nail, the Creator used that to make this earth that we know it as today. And from that bit of earth, he made human beings. He made all of the animals and plants that we know of today that provide so much goodness to our people. And because of the turtle's commitment, faith in himself, and for doing this, this is why today many of us in this part of the world refer to this land as Turtle Island. It's to remember the faith that the little turtle had. It's to remind us of the courage that he had to do this important task, and the faith that he had in Creator, in his songs and his prayers. And so this story is so powerful and is so important for us to remember, to be reminded every day when we try something new, when we go through this life with uncertainty, that we have faith in ourselves and we have faith in our Creator and the songs and the prayers that we have and that we carry with us. And when I think back to what our ancestors did, that they had faith. And when I think back to the things like Corinne, you share about being the only basket weaver and not being sure why people trust you or encourage you to do certain things, that you have faith in it. and that Creator will bless you, and Creator will continue to bring blessings to our people. And this is important for us to share with our young people, that our job isn't our job is simply to try our best and to always have faith in our Creator and in our songs and our prayers, because that's where our power lies. That's where we draw our strength from, is through prayer, because we as human beings are limited to our abilities, but through spirit is where we gain our true strength. And so be reminded of this story when those times of darkness come in your life, or when things get hard, that there's a song for you, that there's a prayer that you can speak to help you in those times of darkness, and that everything will be okay as long as you try your best. And so it's so important that these things, these stories, they teach us, because they remind us of who we are and the strength that we carry. And this is what sustained our people since the beginning of time. And that's why these stories are important to share. When you hear a story and when you remember it, that you share it, that you give that away to somebody, because in it, there could be a message of hope that that person needs to hear, that there may be a message of guidance that that person yearns for, or that they need in their journey, and not to hold on to those things. That's the gift that Creator gave to us through our stories, and to be reminded of those beautiful gifts that our ancestors held on to in their darkest times, and the things that they passed on to our generations to help us, to remind us of who we were and where we came from. Because in the end, no person or no government can take that away from us. It's something that runs deep within us and reminds us of those beautiful things. And so I want to encourage you to share the story in the best way that you can, and not try to tell a story exactly as the person that told you, but to tell it in your own way, incorporating your own experiences, because someone will connect with that. Someone needs that. And so I just want to say again how grateful I am for this space, even this virtual space, that we get to share these beautiful gifts that our ancestors left for us. And that is a showing of resilience, that even in 2022, we can use virtual technology to help heal our people, that we can help heal. Because when the people of this earth and this land heal, then the earth will heal. And that is a message that a beautiful elder that came from the islands of Hawaii told us when he came to our sacred roundhouse and we sat together. He shared a beautiful message of the importance of healing the people so that healing of the earth will begin. And so I want to share that message with our people, is to remember where you came from, tell your stories, sing your songs, pray your prayers, dance the dances, continue to do those beautiful things even when it's hard. And so again, thank you to my elders. Thank you to my mom, to my family that took time to share with me the things that were important, our dances, our ceremonies, those things that have helped me in my journey. And I hope that this story was encouraging to you. And we've come in from a beautiful gathering this past week. We had a national healing conference where we brought in many organizations to share this message of healing with our people, to encourage them. And so it's so beautiful to see our Indian people, no matter, you know, in the different communities that they come from, doing this work. And I just want to acknowledge all of them and say that to keep doing this beautiful work, because it's important and you're needed and you have a place, and to acknowledge your strengths, seek prayer in the things that you need, that you're working on. And I'm so grateful for this space and this time to be together. And we're always looking for more support to do this work. And so if you're inspired by this story and you want to support our work in tribal community, you can go to our website, knwi.org, and make a donation. We are a 501c3, so we get to work within that government system to help us do this work. And you get a tax deduction. So that's one of the benefits of doing that. But this work is important, and it's happening. It's been happening. We've been doing this work since 2016. We're working to heal our people. And so we appreciate anyone's support in this work. And you can find out more of the things that we do, providing trainings and workshops and outreach to, again, our tribal community and our non-tribal communities. So I'm so grateful to be here and have this partnership with the Middletown Art Center to providing different forms of healing for our communities through weaving our communities together and bridging the two worlds that we live in and working in collaboration. So we appreciate all of our allies who stand with us in this healing journey, and that stand with us in reclaiming our lands and allowing us to be a part of the environment, because we play an important role in healing our lands and tending to our lands, and this knowledge that's coming back to our people. So thank you all for your time. And I'm so honored to introduce our next storyteller, Eric Wilder, a man of many talents, a beautiful artist, and I'm excited to story and share this with him. Thank you to Kareen and Tony for sharing their story with me and for taking time to listen. So I'll hand it over to Eric.
Oh, very good. I got to follow that. Thank you, Yahweh. En maya iwa bidwe. Kambe e keshichima. Eric e keshichima. Kashaya poma no potol bakeya. Wenama bakeya chma no potol bakeya. I said, how are you all tonight? Thank you. My name is Eric. I'm from the Kashaya Pomo people. My spiritual name is Ka Ben, which means rockman. And that is that's the person who keeps the rhythm during the feather dance songs. I was named after my great uncle. Even that has a story. When I received my name, I was a little baby, but then after I got older, I was told that that's the sacred name that will be asked for when we go before the Creator, when we take that journey. And the Creator will ask you what your name is, and that's the name you will say. But like I said, I'm from Kashaya. I'm a Kashaya Pomo. And for those of you that don't know me, my grandmother was Essie Parrish, and my grandfather was Sidney Parrish. My grandmother was our spiritual leader, our doctor, and she passed away in 1978, 79. I was 15. And I had learned a lot from them. I wanted to be a feather dance singer. I really my grandfather was our lead singer, and they used to have the big gatherings in our roundhouse, and I remember old man Wallace Burroughs would come from, and his family would come from Grindstone, and the Point Arena Pomo people would come down, and they would dance with us for 4 days, and then afterwards they would gather at my grandfather's place, and the singers would sit around outside the house, and they built the fire, and then they would sing songs. Then they would say, "Did you ever hear this song?" And they would sing, and then Wallace Burroughs would sing a song, and it would just go around like that for hours. And I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be a singer, and so I asked if I could learn, and so my grandmother did a ceremony for me to become a singer, and my grandfather started teaching me songs, and then when my grandmother passed away when I was 15, my grandfather had passed away the year before suddenly, but when my grandfather passed away the year before, I heard one of my aunts say that my grandmother wasn't going to leave the feather dancing. She was going to close the roundhouse when she passed away. And then I heard them talking, my aunts, and one of my aunts said, "Why? They've been teaching Eric all these things, and then one of my aunts said, Mom said nobody was worthy of it, and that I was 14 then, and to me I was thinking, what did I do wrong? Was I not faithful enough? Did I not pray enough? But what is it, and I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to hear somebody say, well, your faith wasn't strong enough or something like that. I felt embarrassed. And then when I was 27 years old, I asked my aunt, I said, I heard you say at Grandpa's funeral that Grandma wasn't going to leave the feather dancing. And I heard you say that nobody was worthy of it. I said, what did I do wrong? And my aunt said, you didn't do anything wrong. She said, Mom saw in her dream that the family wasn't going to support you by dancing the feathers, she said, because when Mom died, she said, the family was lost because she was our spiritual leader and we didn't have a spiritual leader. And so they were like, we don't have a leader. Why are we going to do that? She said, and you as the lead singer, you're the owner of those feathers. And you know the rule for that. They have to be danced 4 times a year once for each season, she said. And nobody was going to be there to dance them for you. And those things are all made of living things, plant and animals, feathers and everything. So she said, they all have a spirit. And she said that you were taught all that, and that if those things aren't danced, they become a sickness in the owner. And she saw the spirit showed her that you were going to get sick and you were going to die. And so that's why she didn't leave it, to save my life. And but for me at that time, at 15, when she died, they had taught me about plants. They had taught me about sacred, our sites, our gathering areas. They taught me some language. They taught me how to make regalia. They taught me the songs, different kind of songs, and I would help them sometimes pick basket material, and I learned all of that, and I was like, what am I going to do now? that's all I wanted to do. I didn't really have any desire to be like a baseball player or something like that, or a doctor or whatever. I wanted to be that and learn all that. And there was no roundhouse anymore. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? But then I also had this love for art, you know, and so I did that. And then I ended up winning a scholarship. And then when I was about 2 weeks away from going to university, my dad got hurt, paralyzed, and no, my mom wasn't working, and they had no money, and there was a thing about the business, the company my dad was working with said that he hurt his back at some other previous employment, and they weren't going to give him workers' comp, and so they had no way to even buy food, and I had an opportunity to go work for the state parks, and so I called the university and said, I'm going to go. I need to go do this for a semester, and then I can come. And they said, if you don't come now, then you're going to lose your scholarship. And like I say, I don't even think I thought for a second. I said, well, I'll give it to somebody else then. And I didn't go. I didn't go to art school. And then years passed by, and I would draw something once in a while, but it was like, wow, I can't be a singer, and now I can't do my art. And it was depressing for a lot of years. And then I met this guy who we talked about art, and that conversation was the thing that triggered me. And I just drew every day. And finally, a company saw my work that was in a store. I was drawing posters for a comic book store, and they asked me to come in for an interview, and they hired me as an animator in the video game industry. And so then from there, I learned to do character designing and storyboarding and concept drawing and all of that kind of stuff. And then I ended up going to work for my tribe. And the first thing they did was ask me if I could help with a language grant. And I found that I could draw on all my traditional teaching and all my art teaching and use it all to preserve who we are, our language, and everything that I know I could use. And everything is full circle. And so that's how I started. That's how I started doing my art again. And it has a meaning and a passion for me. And now I'm able to share all this knowledge that I have through my art. And that's what I do. And I currently am the president of the board of the Wallala Art Center in Wallala. And I use that to put on a show every year called the Native Art Expo. And I bring all natives that I can who want to come. I don't care if you're a novice. I don't care if you're professional. If you're a native and you love art, bring your art. We all want to see. But so anyway, tonight I want to tell some stories that I did, that I had learned. And the thing is sometimes it gets hard for me to call them stories because to me and my family, they're historical events. So I'm going to tell a few historical events, and I hope that you like them. I'm going to do a screen share here. Hold. So the first story or historical event I want to tell is called The Rockman and the Sharpshin Hawk Boys. And this is from a historical event that's shared in our collection of historical events. It's called the Kashaya text. And there was a bunch of, back in the 60s, a bunch of our elders recorded all these down for us. And then the storyteller, what I was told by my grandmother is that there was one guy or one person who was the storyteller for our people. And I asked, I said, how did they tell that story without, changing it a lot or whatever. And I was told that the storyteller was, they called it fixed up. In other words, they went through a ceremony and a spirit worked through them to tell the stories, these events, and that's why they stayed the same. And my grandmother said they would go to this guy's house at night, and they would have to lay, all the kids would have to lay in a circle, and he would stand in the middle and tell these events to them. She said that's what they did when I was a little girl, she said. But in my generation, we never had that storyteller man or person anymore. So this is one of the tales here. So this man lived in a village with his wife, and he had 2 boys. And he one day he wanted to go and hunt deer, and so he went out into the middle of the woods and to see if he could get lucky and get a deer. And while he was out there in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the forest, he heard a voice. And this voice said, "I'm going to kill you." And he's got paused, and he's like, did I hear that? You know? And then it said it again, "I'm going to kill you." And then he got scared. And then when he turned around, he saw this giant person made out of rock. And he killed that man. He lopped his head off and took his body and burned it. And so his wife was waiting for him to come home, and he'd never come home for days. And she started going around to different places asking if they'd seen him or if they knew what happened to him. And eventually they all said, well, something happened to him. And so she had these 2 little boys, and these little boys would, they would like make spears and things and want to go hunting. And she would always tell them, you don't go far from the village, you stay close here, something could happen to you. And so they did. They would just play around near the village and pretend to hunt and stuff. But they got older, and in the young teens, and again they were going to try to go hunting, and their mother said, no, don't go out, you stay close. She was scared that something was going to happen to them too, and so they stayed close. They would go out a little further, but they would stay close. And then they grew into young men, and so they were going out, and the mother again said, you guys stay close, don't go too far. They said, okay, but then when they went out, they went deep into the middle of the forest. And when they got into the middle of the forest, they were out there, and then that's when they heard this voice, the same voice their father heard. And it said, I'm going to kill you. And then they were like, did you hear that? Not sure. And then it said it again, I'm going to kill you. I killed your father right there. And then they said, yeah, I heard that. And then they went looking for where that voice was coming from. And they came to a huge sweat house. It was giant. And they went down toward the sweat house, and they saw this giant rock man laying in there, but it was just looked like roots and stuff were coming out of the entrance. And they were like, what is that? That's his whiskers, they said. And so they both grabbed some, and they were both pulling on it. And when they yanked on it, the whole sweat house was shaking and rumbling. And then they pulled really hard, and they yanked it out, and part of his lip too. And that's when he got mad, and he busted out of his sweat house, destroyed it, and he stood up in there and came out. And so then they ran, and then the rock man started chasing them across the landscape, running after them. and he had this huge flint knife, and he was swinging it. And whenever he would swing high, they would duck down really low, or when he swooped it low, they would jump over it, and they were running to avoid him. And as they were running, they they were trying to get away from him, but he was so huge, And so finally they noticed that on his right under his collarbone there was a abalone shell that he had hanging there. And they said, one of the older brothers said, you call up a big strong wind and I'll shoot an arrow and I'll hit him there. And they found out that he was made all of rock, but there was that one spot under that abalone shell that was flesh. And so the younger brother started to sing and brought up a strong wind. And then as he got closer, the other brother notched the arrow and shot it. And when he shot it, he hit that flesh area, that abalone shell went up and he hit that fleshy part, and he was coming after them. And then he hit that fleshy spot and he exploded. And rock rained down everywhere, landing, huge giant boulders. And so now they say today, that's why you see like these big rock crags and boulders and things and gravel and everything that's from the rock man. And that's how rock came onto the land. And so after that was done, the brother said, older brother said, we did something spiritual here. We can't go back to our village now after we did this. So he goes, he shot an arrow to the south. And he said, he's the younger brother, he goes, I'm going to go to the south and I'm going to go to find a mountain down there and I'll live there. And you go to the north and you find a mountain there and live there. And so they did. And so when they did, they didn't go back to their village, and the mother didn't know what happened to them. But before they left, the older brother said, when I come back from the south, there'll be a southern rain that will come. And when you come down from the north, it'll be hail coming, he said. So they say now when there's a southern rain, that's the older brother crying. And when you have hail, that's the younger brother from the north crying because they didn't get to come home. And that's the end of that story. This one I heard my grandfather tell me. He said during the time they were having a roundhouse, once there was a man that had come from Calusa. He was an old man, he said, and after roundhouse, they were up at his house and he was telling him, we have this story we tell our people, he said. And he said, one time, a long time ago before they were white people, he said, there was stories and our people would talk about that there was a roundhouse inside of the mountain there, inside this big mountain over there, he said. Anyway, they would talk about that. And sometimes they would hear music coming from that mountain. Anyway, there was these three young guys, crazy, you know how young guys can be, and they wanted to go see. So they decided they were going to go and see if they could find that roundhouse. And so they did. They went to that mountain one night, and then they heard music, and they went and found the entrance, and they saw inside there was a roundhouse inside of that mountain. So they snuck in there to get closer to take a look. And when they got there, there was all these animal people, and then there birds and raccoons and bear people and deer people, all kind of animals, and they were all dancing, and they all had this regalia on like we wear today. And they watched, and they were looking at them. Then they were dancing all night long, and the birds were the ones that were singing. And they were saying that was the most beautiful songs they ever heard, music they had. And so they went every night for a week. They went and would watch. They never got seen. And they learned those songs, and they learned how to make that regalia. And they came back to the village, and they taught everybody these songs and how to make this regalia. And so at one point, there was about 500 people that left that village, and they came out here. That old man said near where Jenner is here at the Russian River. They came all the way out here, and they stopped off at all the villages that they came across, and they taught them all these feather dance songs and the feather dances and how to make all the regalia. And he said, that's what we're told. That's how the feather dances came to the people. And he said, I say that because he goes, some of the songs you sing sound like our songs that we sing. And when I would remember when I was learning to be a singer, people would ask my grandmother and grandfather, they go, what do the words to those songs mean? And I didn't really know what her answer was. Kind of confusing to me. And she would say, those, I don't know. Some of those songs, I don't know the words. That's old language, she said. Spiritual language, she said. But I don't know what those words mean. And so now I know it's the language of these birds. That's what it is, And so anyway, that's where I was told the feather dance songs came from. And then when I was learning to be a singer, my grandfather would talk to me about how to breathe and, what, when you pray, when you sing, and you sing lively, and that'll make the dancers become energized and they'll want to dance harder, And so one of the things he said, he sat me down, he goes, when I went through ceremony to become a singer, he said, I went down to the river one day, and when I went down there were these 3 tall birds, he said, or 4 tall birds, and they were waving me over, he said. And I went over there, and they said, you're going to receive your feather dance songs, and we're going to lay you in the river, and you're going to hear the music come down, and you pick out the songs that you want. And so they took him and they laid him in the river. Said just his head was sticking out. And as he was laying there, he said, I could hear music coming from upriver, and it would come down. He goes, it was in the water. He goes, and it was flowing over my body when it got to me, he said, and I could hear the music. I could hear the songs, he said, and they were beautiful. He said, they were the most beautiful songs I ever heard. And he said, I love that song. It's beautiful. I want that song. And then he'd go, I want that song. That's beautiful. Love that song. And he said, you didn't have to write them down. They stayed with them, because it was all spiritual. And he said, that's how I got my songs, he said, because he had his own songs, and I'm going to teach them to you, he said. But like I said, I never did get a chance to be a feather dance singer, but I did go through the ceremony and everything. And one of the things that I didn't know as a singer was that hold on, let me close this up. One of the things that I didn't know was that when you become a singer, for me anyway, I started dreaming. I started dreaming about things that were happening to people, and it was coming true. But there were always things that were like people getting hurt. And things happening to them. And then a couple of days later, it would happen. And I got scared and I didn't say anything, you know. And I'm like, why is this happening to me, you know? And I asked my grandmother and I told her, I was like kind of scared to say, I'm like, yeah, you know, she's the doctor. I'm nothing, you know. Why is this stuff I'm dreaming about coming true, you know? And I didn't want to tell her because I was like, gee, they might think I'm trying to be something that I'm not, you know. And but I did. I asked, and she said, when you were made a singer through ceremony, she says, you were given part of my doctoring spirit, she said, and it's showing you these things that are going to happen to our people. And now you have the ability through these songs to make that not happen. You can protect our people from being hurt, she said. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. She goes, yeah, she said, that's what part of being a singer is, she said. You can help people. And I was like, wow, you know, it was another teaching, you know. And so that's my stories, you know, like I say, when I talk to the kids about these things that I was taught, I said, you need to remember that within you is your grandparents, and your ancestors too are within you. And you're each given a talent. You each have a talent. And don't hide it. Bring it out for everyone to see, especially our children, so that they won't be lost along the way. They won't grow up like the wild weeds. They'll know who they are through all of these things that you teach, that we teach, that we pass down, she said. And they won't grow up like the wild weeds, like I said, and that gives our kids a firm rock to stand on, which means they'll know who they are. And when I went to the JC, I've seen a lot of other people from other races, you know, trying to learn about their Italian history or Scottish history or wherever, you know, trying to learn who they are. And I felt so privileged to know who I was, you know, because of these stories and teachings. So these historical events are true, that, you know, and we have all these things from the land that we know and know how to respect. And that all comes from this, and that's all a healing for us. That's, you know, so anyway, it was my honor to be here tonight and talk to you and tell what I know. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to Anthony, to Corinne, to Eric, and to Kyle for your wonderful sharing and storytelling. Our hearts are all so open from this. I know I speak for everybody here. We're so grateful and honored to be able to hear you and to be able to listen and feel with our whole selves all that you're sharing. It's such an awesome, in the true sense of the word, experience to be grounded in who you are and what you share and the traditions that you share. I have no more words to share. I would appreciate it, Summer, if you could turn everybody on so that everybody could see everybody. And I welcome everybody to turn your cameras on so that we can all see one another and acknowledge one another's presence at this evening, at this very special event. This is just really so wonderful, so wonderful. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here, and especially to our storytellers for sharing, and to Rose for making this happen tonight. Thank you all.